Good morning. We are here to do the people's business. It's good to see everybody for our meeting today. We'll call this meeting to order. And I want to make sure that there are a series of items that have been provided to us from an addendum perspective. And if there's no objection, we'll add the addendum items to the special call meeting agenda. There's no objection. All right. Seeing none, Chair recognizes Attorney Brown.
Mayor, Commissioners, good afternoon. I will request a motion to go into executive session for the discussion of personnel litigation pending or potential.
So move.
Second.
Mr. Hassan and Ms. Scott?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are we ready to vote, sir?
Voting. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Franum,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett? He's.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Hassan,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries unanimously.
Attorney Brown.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ready to proceed.
Okay.
You're ready.
Are we still on the floor?
I know we should be.
I'm in a legal meeting.
Okay, okay.
All right.
All right. You ready, Ms. Bonner?
I am.
All right, we need a what? Closed meeting?
Affidavit.
Yes, ma'am.
Need a motion to execute closing meeting affidavit, please, sir.
So move.
Oh, we got a motion in a second.
Can you tell me who that was? I'm sorry, there were several at the same time.
I think that was High Sun and I don't know, put Catherine McDake down there. Her hand is up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, are you ready to vote, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Clark? Mr. Franum?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett? Mr. Son?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, ma'am.
Miss McKnight?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams?
And yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Clark and Mr. Garrett out.
All right, are we going to the attorney, Ms. Bonner?
If he's ready. I
You
don't know.
ready?
Yes, sir.
He's ready. All right,
Uh,
motion
uh,
one.
Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioner, we request a motion to approve a buyout of 75 hours of vacation time for general counsel to be paid on the next scheduled payday.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Anytime you're ready, Ms. Bonner.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Franum?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett? Mr. Son?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Garrett out.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, number two.
Thank you, sir. We request a motion to adopt a settlement resolution to settle the matter of Michael Cuccia versus Kathy Gilreath, Augusta, Georgia, and the Sheriff Department in an amount of $53,250.
Anytime you're ready, Ms. Go ahead. Anytime you're ready, Ms. Bonner.
We need a motion, sir.
Need a motion.
Second.
That's Mr. Sias and Mr. Dennis Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Clark?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Franum?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett? Out. Mr. Son?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Garrett out.
All right. Number three, Mr. Attorney.
Yes, sir. Request a motion to rescind the commission's denial of the planning agenda item Z-21-24 and to place it on the commission agenda on May 18th, 2021 for reconsideration and approval, and to direct and authorize the planning department to make the necessary advertisement as required by law prior to that meeting.
So move.
Second.
Got a motion in a second, Ms. Bonner. Anytime you're ready.
Mr. Clark?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Franum?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett? Mr. Son?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Scott?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams?
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Clark, Mr. Franum, and Ms. McKnight voting no, Mr. Garrett out.
Hey, and Ms. Bonner, I think I moved so fast. Did you announce the results of the previous? Or did I move too fast on that one?
No, sir, I thought I announced that.
Oh,
You did for the
okay, well, I just have to
settlement
make,
agreement, the settlement agreement?
yes, ma'am.
Yes, that motion
Yeah.
carried with Mr. Garrett out.
Okay, okay. Anything else, Attorney Brown?
No, sir.
Okay, we're gonna take 5 when we come back. Public service, when you get the majority of your people, get it going.
Just a moment, just a moment, just a
Hang on a
moment.
second.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
no, sir, we were supposed to, for the record, approve the agenda item that I sent out regarding supporting documentation
Yes, ma'am.
for, let me just read it. As requested by the commission on March 6, 2021, status on submittal of 1947 Eagles Way to 1568 Broad Street Facility, Phase 2, relocation improvement, construction plan, and funding sources by April 13th for Phase 2 improvements and final approval, along with the supplemental documentation for this item as processed and completed and requires a commission approval to proceed with construction. So if you
Yes,
So
can
ma'am.
make a motion on that.
Hang on one second. Mr. Hassan, you have a question?
No, I just want to make a motion. I want to add it to the agenda and approve it.
Well, we
We
considered
already
it.
had it.
Already
We
added,
added,
okay.
we just need to
Motion
approve it.
motion to approve.
I think Mr. Size did the motion.
I'll do,
Second.
I'll let him have it second.
Second.
I'm
All right.
easy.
Okay,
Okay. Mr. Clark? Mr. Franum?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garrett?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Hassan?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sias?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams?
yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams?
And yes, ma'am.
That motion carries with Mr. Clark out.
Anything else, Ms. Bonner?
No, sir, that's it.
All right, we'll take 5 when we come back. Public service starts when they get the majority of the people. So let's take 5,
Yes, sir, control man.
whatever.
Yes, sir.
All right, we are back out to start committees today, April 27th. Call public services to order. Is there any additions or deletions, Ms. Bonner, to the agenda?
No, sir.
All right, if the alcohol petitions are ready, we're gonna go top to bottom with number one. Ms. Bonner?
Okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Our first item is alcohol number 21-13. It's a request by Hong Chen Kim for a retail package liquor, beer, and wine license to be used in connection with 365 liquor stores located at 2852 Bridge Road, Suite D. This application has been approved by the Sheriff's Office and Planning and Development.
Just start back up.
Is the applicant there in the room?
Yes.
They could state their name and address for the record, please. And was there any objection to the petition?
We did receive a phone call on yesterday. Mr. Sherman and myself spoke with the person that was in opposition. We told him that the applicant did meet all the requirements. We explained to him about the distance, and we did tell him he could show up at the meeting today if he wanted to object. No one here in the chamber. Do we have any objectors? No objectors.
Thank you, ma'am. Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Hong Chin Kim. I'm coming from 967 Cameron Way, Augusta, Georgia, 30907.
Any questions from the colleagues? Can I get a motion, please?
No,
So
sir.
move.
Second. Got a motion and a second. If we could please vote, Ms. Bonner?
Mr.
No.
Franum,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
and Mr. Science.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Bonner. Agenda item number 2, please.
Our second item is alcohol number 21-14. It's a request by Keith Parker for a consumption on-premise liquor, beer, and wine license to be used in connection with Ice Lounge and Restaurant located at 722 Broad Street. There will be dance. This location has been approved by, excuse me, Planning and Development and the Sheriff's Office. There were no objectors to this application.
Thank you. If you could please state your name and address for the record, sir.
Keith Gerard Parker, 1926 Christie Way, Castleboro, Georgia, 30815.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, colleagues? Can I get a motion? Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Ms. Bonner, if we could please vote.
Mr. Franum,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
and Mr. Science.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Bonner. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
Second. Got a motion and a second. Ms. Bonner, if we could please vote.
Mr. Franum,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Science.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, committee. That concludes public services.
Took
Good
2
job,
minutes.
Ms. Bonner, you ready for administrative services?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any addition or deletions?
No, sir. No, sir.
I think we have one addition. I think Ms. Scott's on. I don't
Oh,
see it
we
on.
do. An update on the rental assistance. I'm sorry. Yes, I sent out an addendum on that.
So can I get?
Update from HCD on
Yeah.
the rental assistance program.
Thank you, ma'am. Can I get consent to add that to the agenda? No objectors? All right, thank you. Ms. Bonner will make that the last item when we get to it. So it'll be item number 11. So you have 10 items, so just be item number 11, the one we just added.
Okay, the addendum.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, I'd like to consent from item number 1 all the way through item number 8. Either anybody on the committee has any objectives or any of my colleagues in between?
So moved.
Second.
Voting,
Mr. Hassan,
yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Franum,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Item number 9.
Item number 9 is a request by Commissioner Jordan Johnson to rename the Hillside Park located at 1201 Telfair Street, the Vernon Forest Park.
2101, Ms. Bonner.
I beg your pardon?
2101. It's okay.
21.
You said 1201, Ms. Bonner.
Okay, 2101 for the record. Thank you. Correction.
Motion to approve.
Second. Voting, Ms. Bonner?
I am, sir. I'm getting there. Mr. Hassan,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Franum,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Williams. Mr. Bobby Williams,
He on.
he's muted. Okay,
No, I'm good. I'm good, Ms. Bonner.
thank you.
Doing consulting work right now.
Chairman, what number are we on?
No,
Nine.
you didn't.
We're at number 10 now.
We're at number
Hey,
10.
Ma'am,
Ms.
you taking it behind the woodshed with that one?
Yeah, but let me break in here for just a second. Ms. Bonner, remember you and the mayor had some communication about recognition for the schools that won the state championship.
Hold on, Mr. Chairman.
Hang on. Mr. Hassan, Mr. Hassan.
Mr. Mayor, put it down.
No. I just want to ask a question, because what needs to happen is that we're going to need to take a break because of communication between the mayor's office and Ms. Bonner. We need to take a break and recognize these schools so we can continue and finish yours. And then we need to take about 15 minutes and then we'll continue, if that's okay.
Hold on, Mr. Chairman. Hold on, Mr. Chairman.
Put it on the end.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
Well, let me say for clarification, when the request was made, there was not an identification of a committee in which these recognitions were going on. I never received a response. I just assumed they would be done after the special call meeting before committees. There was never an identified committee that these recognitions go on with the clerk's office.
Okay, well, I just received notification that we were supposed to do them at 1. So we can decide to continue or we can break and then do the recognitions.
Well, I'm gonna recommend that we continue because you got something else that you're trying to do for them anyway, Mr. Commissioner. And so I'm gonna recommend that we continue unless my committee want to do something different.
No, you can finish. You can finish. What I'm saying is after you get finished, that we take about a 15-minut break to do the recognitions and then continue on, if that's okay with the remainder of the folks. Go ahead and finish, Mr. Hassan.
Ms. Bonner, where are we? You done got me upside down.
Number 10.
Let me mute my mic.
Okay, go ahead. Item number 10.
Item 10 is to discuss small business funding and application process.
Mr. Administrator, did you have this put back on the agenda?
It was deferred from the April 20th commission meeting to discuss at this meeting.
Yes, so after we had some inquiries during the meeting, and we just thought it'd be a good idea for the public record to just kind of highlight what our process is, show folks what the documents are, as well as let them know where they can access some technical assistance. And I believe Commissioner Scott kind of led the charge to bring it back on this agenda. So we're thankful for that opportunity. And Director Hawthorne Welcher is in the waiting room. If that is okay with you, Mr.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. It's on the agenda. It's fine.
And I believe he is in. Actually, I don't see. He's coming in now. Mr. Welcher, awaiting your presentation on just providing our small business process and the documents and how folks can access technical assistance.
Mr. Welcher, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mr. Mayor, and other members of the commission, I'm going to attempt to share my screen.
Josie, God damn it, Josie.
So happy to provide you all with a update in regards to your small business relief program, which is a part of your CARES Act, Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security, part of the $4.8 million that was received through Augusta Richmond County, of course, from a CDBG perspective, of which your small business relief program is a part of. It was a matter of $2.2 million that came down here. As several conversations that we had, one thing that I will point out is basically the reestablishment, of this program. And of course, that came in January of 2020. Of course, it came through a tiered program wherein we looked at being able to award or provide relief through funding to employees, to business who had employees up to 100 employees through two tiers, 7,500 for 20 and below, and then 15,000 for 21 to 100. Currently, to date, we've awarded or assisted 118 businesses. Also, along with that, we've retained one low to moderate income employee per business for a total of $819,000 that has been expended. One thing that I will notate is that you have an additional 20 to 30 small businesses that are nearing completion and or approval that basically at the time of generating this report were not really to be a part of. So you typically could have up to about 138 businesses to date that actually have been awarded. I think another thing that's very important to also notate is you see a number there when you look at 530 applications that are still in process. One thing that I really want to be sure that we notate under the outreach measures, the fact that we are continuing to stay in contact to be sure that we provide phone calls, emails, and follow up to these businesses to basically get them over the threshold. Another thing that's very important that I would notate is that no business, there has not been one business to date that we have actually denied just in totality. That has not happened. Basically, what we've done is we may say not right now. And if it's not right now, another one of our outreach measures you see there, we're providing individual technical assistance. And one thing that we will do and continue to do is to provide individual technical assistance at the pleasure and based on the schedule of the respective small business. Further, if I was to continue to talk about this program, a question may come about in regards to, well, how long, basically does it take? How long does this process take? The first thing I will say on an average, it takes a small business, if they sit down from beginning to end based on our 14 asks, it takes about 2.5 to 3 hours to complete this application. This application from a summary perspective basically has 7 steps. And from an application inception through our neighborly software, which is date, time, and stamp, it takes about 10 to 15 days from application submittal to approval through the execution of agreement by our mayor. One thing that I really want to enforce today and have a conversation with you about based on conversation from delegates on last week centers around our 14 asks. If you look at our 14 asks, asks 1 through 4 speak specifically to those requirements from Augusta Procurement. We have to validate to be sure that we are actually working with certified businesses. And if you look at the requested information, of course, this information was provided to you also on yesterday. Asks 5 through 14 are specific to Code of Federal Regulations. In that, when we have conversations with HUD Atlanta and HUD Washington, and they ask us to sort of validate and to process from a procurement standpoint, we want to be sure with confidence that we can well within reason say that from auditing, whether it's from a quarterly basis and or from a annual basis, that we have secured all reputable information necessary to be sure that we are audit friendly. With that, I can stop here, pause for questions. I know I went through the information, wanted to provide you not only with the requested information that we request, but the reason why we requested information, which is there in red. Also wanted to back up and provide you also with our funding cycle in regards to exactly, how our application process reads, what are those steps involved, as well as the total time frame associated with it. And then also first, when I went over it, provided you with a brief overview in regards to the number of awards that have been made to date, the total amount of funding that we have provided through assistance, as well as it breeds to the amount of funding that is from a balance perspective still available. Understanding the fact that from expenditure deadline, we have until September 2025 to expend all funds. So we are well within our right of tracking in a positive manner.
Yeah, Director Welcher, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on your presentation and just highlight that I think the commission will remember that when we first decided to revamp the program, we had only gotten out the door about $200,000, and we've now approaching $1 million in record time, according to the feds. And beyond that, we've streamlined this process. While there are 14 pieces of information, it's very important to notate that once folks submit those documents and they do receive technical assistance and that concierge red carpet service that we kind of stole from Director Dowse, in making sure that everybody can reach out to a member of the team in HCD to walk them through the process. And even beyond that, there's no requirement that if folks submit those 14 documents, they go directly to receiving funds. And so this is actually the most direct process that any of our counterparts have when leveraging these HUD funds. So I just wanted to highlight that and provide some kudos to Director Welcher and his team for streamlining it, but also being thankful to the commission for allowing us to take this new route.
Are there any questions for the administrator for Mr. Welcher, Director Welcher? Should we take the screen down, please?
Director, you can stop sharing your screen.
Any questions? Commissioner Sayers, go ahead. Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say again, similar to what the administrator said, even before the administrator got here, while I was administrative chair of administrative service, we had asked Mr. Welcher to continue to streamline that process. So we want to say is, I want to commend them for not repeating the mistakes of the past, where we actually gave money under federal guidelines and then had to go pay it back. So I want to give Director Welcher and the administrator who are coming on to really have held us to the line of doing this stuff the right way. Yeah, there are going to be some businesses who really want some money, but if they don't qualify, unfortunately, they can't get it. And we should not bend the rules, twist the rules, or break the rules to try to help somebody when we know that's wrong. We've had the instances of having to pay back federal money. So I want to commend Director Welcher, Mr. Welcher, for his work and his crew for the work that they've done and the way they've done it correctly. So I feel completely confident that every dollar that was issued out the door is a valid dollar, and we don't have to turn around and worry about that particular issue, because we have had to worry about that in the past. Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question for Director Welcher. The 530 applicants that are just sort of waiting, that are not completed, do you see any kind of trend with the documentation that they may be missing? Like, is there a specific piece of documentation that you're seeing that's common amongst folks who are just not able to complete the application?
I can't necessarily say if it's common, but I can say that there are some missing items. I think also one of the things that we're finding is the fact that, while we're dealing with a lot of entrepreneurs, there's still, in my opinion, some additional technical assistance that needs to take place. I think you have some people who look at an application of like kind and they sort of get intimidated a little bit. And we want to be sure that we bridge that gap because, you know, each one teach one. And we want to be sure that everybody that wants to be a part, and we want to be sure that we sort of bring them along. And I say that because one of the things that we've relaxed, when you start talking about entrepreneurship and you start talking about small business lending, credit and collateral and capital, those things are ultimately important. Of course, we did not ask for credit reports. Of course, we're not asking any business to provide any type of one-on-one collateral. And then we're definitely not even looking from a capital perspective. But those are things that we want to teach to be sure that get persons from process, not only from process to approval, but process to approval to sustainment. And I think that's one of the things that we're looking at trying to move forward in partnership, hopefully with, not going to call out names, but hopefully in partnership, you know, with one of our chambers to sort of speak to how do we look to progressing and sustaining our small businesses, have them understand exactly what financial models are, how to look at, you know, forecasting 3 to 5 to 7 years down the road. So that's what I see. There's a missing link when you start talking about entrepreneurship to processing and sustaining.
Anybody else? Any follow-up?
Thank you. Thank you both.
Can I get a motion to receive as information?
Motion to receive as information.
On a second that, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I give a second response.
Without objection.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. The addendum item is an update from HCD regarding the rental assistance program requested by Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Ms. Bonner, Mr. Chair. Director Welcher is in here. We have talked last week before last, I think, and he satisfied my questions, but hindsight, some people did call and wanted to know, have an update from the community on where we are and are there any hiccups going on with this program. I did get not a lot of calls, but a couple of calls that wanted to make a little noise about not being able to get in and completing the application process.
Mr. Welcher, Dr. Welcher.
Yes, sir. I would like to share my screen again.
Go ahead.
So as update, if you all, can you all see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Try it again, Mr. Welcher. Close. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so as an update with your U.S. Treasury program, one thing that I will first say that this program just came online on March 1st. So within less than almost 2 months, you have already expended $794,000. You have touched a total of 1,029 individuals or 382 households. And with a balance to date of 4.6 million. You see there the administrative amount, but what that administrative amount has allowed us to do to be able to partnership through your approval, United Way of the CSRA, who has hired 5 assistants plus a manager or supervisor to sort of oversee the process. And based on a number of applications, we found out here recently that they are also adding to that workforce as well to be sure that we can sort of move and progress the number of applications a little faster. One thing that I would ask you all to sort of put out to the community as we have is the fact that this program is for Augusta, Hephzibah, and Blythe as well. And I don't think that gets enough recognition, but it is for Augusta, Hephzibah, and Blythe. And you see there the eligible uses of this funding. Of course, we're able to, based on HUD regulations, we stayed with those. So we were very aggressive in how we were looking to provide assistance. And that is, of course, 12 months in arrears plus 3 months going forward. Also, we're able to provide utility relief as well. That's basically your update. I wanted to point these 2 pictures out, and this was a part of your memo. And there was some conversation, a while back about, why was the inspections important? And this is why the inspections are ultimately important. What you're looking at, the picture on the left, when we went out based on the application and went out to do our inspection, we found that basically somebody was living in an uninhabitable situation there. And to the right, what we found out was, of course, from a sewage backup coming from all different angles coming up through the sink. So from our standpoint, while we think it's very, very important to be able to provide the rental assistance, it's ultimately and equally important as well that we be sure that all persons are living in a decent, safe, and sanitary environment. And we're not going to stop until that happens. And I think I've worked with a lot of you commissioners on individual calls in regards to be sure that at the end of the day, we'll be sure that we shelter somebody and then move them back towards rapidly housing them before we let anybody stay in conditions of like kind. So I just wanted to provide that report, but I also want to provide this to you as well.
Mr. Director Welcher, do we have that report or this? Do we have the breakout of that what you just shared with us?
Yes, sir. The presentation that I just gave?
Yes, sir.
You have it in it.
Can you send it to Ms. Bonner for us so we can see, because I saw some other uses there that we may not be familiar with, and sometimes we have our constituents that call us, and so we can direct them in that direction as well. So will you please send that to Ms. Bonner?
Yes, sir.
So send it out to all of Ms. Scott,
yes,
Commissioner Scott, you got any other questions?
I don't have any other questions. Do any of my colleagues have any questions?
I'm second chair now.
You finally.
Hey, that's kind of fitting, though.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Scott. You got it.
So is there any other question? Hey, Ms.
No. Thank you, Director Welcher.
And thank you, Director, for the presentation.
Thank you.
Receive his information.
Second.
Yes, sir. Take it information. I enjoyed that one.
Okay. Ms. Bonner, we through.
Thank God.
Boy, I tell you, let me shut up.
Say, I've been paying these people to jump me.
Hey,
Ms. Bonner, are we ready for engineering?
Yes,
this
sir.
was a good
Let
meeting.
me, Ms. Bonner, let me say this. I think the mayor sent an email asking the schools that we'll get with them at another time. So we're going to continue with the meeting, and that'll be forthcoming.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Ms. Bonner, are we ready?
Yes, sir, we are.
I'd like to call engineering services to order, please.
So moved.
Are there any additions or deletions?
No, sir, they're not.
Fantastic. All righty.
10 seconds.
What do you say, Commissioner?
Is it 10 steps?
10 seconds.
Was he calling somebody else Junebug?
Dang.
All right, we will go top to bottom, Ms. Bonner.
Okay. Item number 1 is consider approving an easement abandonment and the granting of additional rights to existing easements for 3430 Dunnington Place.
All right, thank you. Spoke with the director from utilities about this one, and it looks like there may be an issue with it. And he actually asked us to pass this forward with no recommendation until we could get all the information before the full commission next week. If I could get a
pass without any recommendation.
I hear from Mr. Johnson, Ms. McKnight.
I get a second?
Second.
Second.
Yeah.
voting, Ms. Bonner.
Okay. Mr. Garrett,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hassan,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries unanimously. We move forward with no recommendation.
And number 2.
Item number 2 is to consider approving deed of dedication and maintenance agreement for the water and sanitary sewer in Governor's Place, Phase 1 and 1B.
Are there any further comments on this one? I think this one was pretty straightforward, and anytime that we were able to move forward with adding sanitary sewer to our neighborhoods, I think that is a good thing. So I'll entertain a motion if there's no further comments.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Voting, Ms. Bonner?
Mr. Garrett,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hassan,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
and Ms. McKnight.
Yes, ma'am.
That motion carries unanimously. Item number
Number 3.
3, sir, is a
Yes,
motion
ma'am.
to approve the minutes of the Engineering Services Committee held on April 13th, 2021.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Voting.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hassan,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. McKnight.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Well,
That
that
motion
concludes
carries unanimously.
engineering services. Thank y'all very much.
Quick.
And yes. Thank y'all for y'all's help.
Mr. Sias on board, or are you going with Mr. Dennis Williams? He's co-chair. Is Mr. Sias on? I don't see him. Did he?
Did he leave? Oh. Okay, I'll take it.
You have a quorum.
Okay. I'd like to call Finance Committee meeting to order. Are there any additions or deletions?
No, sir.
If my colleagues would agree, I would like to consent items number 2 and 3.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that was Ms. McKnight and Ms. Scott.
Correct.
I'm back in, Ms. Bonner.
Okay,
Okay.
I got dropped out.
okay. We're at consenting items 2 and 4 with Ms. McKnight and Ms. Scott. Mr. Sias. Okay.
Yes, ma'am, that will be fine. We haven't did item 1 yet, have we?
No, sir.
All right, that's fine.
Okay. We're voting now. Mr. Sias. Mr. Sias, are you going to vote?
He must be mute.
Yeah. I think he's frozen. Mr. Dennis Williams,
Yes.
Ms. McKnight,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scott,
Yes, ma'am.
Piercy's having difficulty. That motion carries with Mr. Sias out.
Okay. Let's
Voting. All right, item number 1, are you?
go right ahead.
Okay, item 1 is to present the financial reports for the 3-month period ending March 31st, 2021.
Okay. Do we have anyone present?
Ms. Donna Williams is on and the administrator is here.
All right, go right ahead. Whoever want to take the lead is fine.
Director Williams is going to present this item.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good
Director
afternoon.
Williams.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Jeff's going to run the presentation for me, and I'll ask him that he just go ahead and put up the next slide, please. A couple of weeks ago, I gave you a summary of the year-end 2020, and today I'm providing an update for you for the first quarter of 2021, which is through March the 31st. This time last year, we were kind of just beginning to feel the impact of the pandemic. We didn't really know which way we were going to go and how it was going to affect us. So we were pretty much on the fringes and not knowing what to expect. This year, for the same period, we seem to kind of be on a fringe again, but this one is a better type of a fringe. We seem to be on the road to recovery and currently making some progress. So for today's discussion, next one, please, Jeff. Today's discussion will cover the individual funds which are normally included in the packet that was attached to your agenda item. We'll touch briefly on the American Rescue Plan that has been approved. We're going to talk about one of our sources of revenue that affects our general fund and law enforcement fund, our sales tax information, and then what you can expect to hear from us in the upcoming months. We always have to issue a disclaimer pretty much on especially the first quarter, because these reports are presented on the cash basis. The revenues that we have, particularly sales tax revenues, really are only 2 months worth of revenue. And if you combine that with the fact that a major portion of our revenue comes in the form of our tax bills, which is received towards the end of the year, the revenues, as I usually refer to them, usually look a little anemic at this point in time. So we do continue to concentrate most of our analysis on the expenditure levels, as those are spread pretty much more evenly through the year and allow us to put our eyeballs on things that look a little bit out of kilter at this time. Next, please. The American Rescue Plan was signed into law by President Biden on March the 11th of this year. It established $362 billion worth of funds that would be available in various sections. The amount that was of particular importance to Augusta are the 2 allocations for direct aid to counties and direct aid to cities, which combined were a little over $130 billion. Augusta's allocation is $84.25 million. Those funds are scheduled to be received in 2 payments. The first payment, which was outlined in the law, is supposed to be received by May the 15th of this year. And then the second payment is scheduled to come in a year later. As they kind of did with the CARES Act funds, wait a minute, Jeff. The guidance on what governing the expenditures of those funds hasn't been completely defined yet. We're going to get the money, and we just have some general guidance right now as to what we're going to need to do. You may have seen the correspondence that's come out from GMA, and a couple of folks had questions about it. 2 of the things that we know that are required is you have to have both an active SAMS registration, that's an acronym for System for Awards Management. That is a system of registration used by the federal government in order to disperse federal funds. We are active, we stay active in SAMS. Our DUNS number, which is primarily tied to bond issuances, that is in place as well. So currently we have done everything that we know we need to do to be in a position to receive these funds when they are released. Next, please. There was some general guidance that was provided. We know a couple of basic things. Regarding the use of these funds, they must be spent by December the 31st, 2024. Now, as we all know, spending money usually isn't a big challenge, but you can't start a project on December the 1st that's not going to be finished by December the 24th, by December the 31st of 2024, and it be eligible. These funds have to be spent right now, according to what we know, by 12/31/2024. Next. The other categories that were broadly outlined in the Act are listed on this page before. The first one is to respond to the public health emergency regarding negative economic impacts. And it lists households, small businesses, nonprofits, tourism, travel, and hospitality. Like I said, these are general guidelines. We are expecting that these will be fleshed out later. Second one is to respond to workers performing essential work. The third one is perhaps the big one for us, what we looked for, what we hoped for in the CARES package that was not in there. It would be allowing us to respond to the reduction in revenue from the impact of COVID-19. And the measurement focus of this is relative to the revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year prior to the emergency. Now, what this means for us is we look back and benchmark it against 2019. And then there are 3 categories of infrastructure that are currently listed: water, sewer, and broadband. So as of this particular point in time, this is the information that we currently have available. And there are numerous sources that are monitoring this. We're all on some sort of a listserv from GMA, ACCG, NACO. They're all waiting these guidelines to come out. Next, please. Okay, this is a little bit of a new topic that I haven't covered very much with you guys before, because it's really a single payment from Georgia Power and from Jefferson EMC. These come in the first quarter. They are based on their revenues that were collected for the prior year. Now, unfortunately, this was not a lot of good news for us for this year. The little red line going across the bottom, as we kind of refer to, a little flat line there, that's from Jefferson EMC. The amounts of revenue that they have remitted to us based on their revenues has essentially gone up a tiny bit, but on the scale that's listed here, you can't really see it. That actually increases just a little bit. Now, Georgia Power is another matter. We have seen since 2012, with the exception of a little bit of a blip, pretty much a steady decline in the remittances from Georgia Power related to their franchise fee. As it states on the bottom here, we received $1.5 million less than we did in the prior year. So $11.49 million in 2020, $9.98 million in 2021. Next, please. Now we did check around. So we had 2 of our counterparts that responded to my inquiries, Macon Bibb and Columbus Muskogee. Their revenue from Georgia Power was also down for these franchise fees. Macon Bibb's was down approximately 5%, and Columbus Muskogee was down almost 9.5%. Theirs was the lowest amount, second lowest amount that they had received since 2014. Ours, we had to go back to 2005 to find collections that were lower than the remittance that we received this year. Possible causes. Obviously, there were business closures during 2020, probably a decreased amount of energy consumption. And there could have been some hesitancy and some delay on people actually paying their electric bills because they just didn't know what was going to happen. And the unemployment was beginning to pick up. We really won't have, I don't know that we will have a firm answer to that. And as I stated, these payments come in once a year. So we find out in March, late February or March of each year, what the actual impact is. Next, please. Sales tax. Okay, this chart is for 20 and 21. The red bars that go all the way across the page are obviously for 2020. And as I stated, we have 2 months worth of revenue that we received for 2021, January and February. We checked this morning hoping that March might be in the bank, but it has not yet been received. So we have 2 months to be able to report to you. Now, the method that we use to budget our predictions for sales tax were a little different. Everything was a little different from 20 to 21. We typically use a rolling 12 months average and then do a growth projection on that. But when we did our original forecast, that little tiny block for April 2020 on there really skewed the average. So when we got down and went through our budget process and made a presentation to you in November, we changed April to represent what we call a normal month. Not a normal April, because that's usually a much higher bar on that, but a normal collection month of a little over $3 million. So then we used the rolling 12-month average for that and predicted a 3.25% growth, which at that time, state of Georgia was predicting somewhere between 3.5% and 3.75%. So we conservatively used 3.25% growth to set our 2021 budget process. Next slide. So how'd we do? We did pretty well in our projections and hope it even gets better. This is the 6-month comparison of what we received in 1 year to the corresponding month for the prior year. So in September 2020, we got 3.172 million in the middle of the page, whereas the year before in 19, we had 3.271. That is the only month for some reason that there still was a decrease. We were still suffering from decreased sales tax collections during the pandemic. But in October of 2020, we started picking up. And for each month since then, we have collected more in sales tax than we did to the corresponding month in the prior year, with February being the lowest with only a 1.31% growth. But for January and February, at the bottom of the page, we are 4.14% over the corresponding period for last year. So January, February 2021, we collected 4.14% more than we did in January and February 2020. So that's a pretty good benchmark, being that we projected 3.25% growth. Now, as you know, time will tell. All projections tend to be more accurate the further out you get and the more data that you've put in there. But as of January and February collections, we're a little over 4% ahead of where we were last year. Next slide, please. This is the busy and colorful slide that gives you 5 years plus the average. I think y'all would be disappointed if it wasn't included. So we put it in the package each time. It's a useful tool for going back. It does get a little hard to read on the screen, and for that reason, it's also included in your package, printed in color for you. I kind of learned that the hard way. I kept telling y'all to look at the red bar and the blue bar and the yellow bar. They were all gray. So we got a little bit smarter and started giving y'all color copies. Okay, Jeff, next one. A little bit of an update on SPLOST 7. Those collections for phase 7 of SPLOST started April the 1st, 2016. We are nearing the end of that phase. Total collections through technically January and February 2021 is a little over $192 million. We have received official notification from the Department of Revenue that our collections on SPLOST 7 are projected to end at the end of this year. So once that happens, we move, next slide, to SPLOST 8. The referendum was approved in March of 2021, and collections will begin seamlessly at the end of the expiration of SPLOST 7. So you will begin SPLOST 8 collections January the 1st, 2022. Now we'll be having some upcoming conversations. There were some of you that were present in 2016 when we started this SPLOST 7 package, and included in the package for SPLOST 8 is $30 million worth of projects to be bonded. So to get to that point and to get to that final conversation regarding bonding, there'll be conversations about what projects are suitable for using bond proceeds and the timing of the projects that were included in SPLOST 8. Obviously, if you approve a listing of $250+ million worth of projects, every single project on that list can't be started the first month that your collections begin. You have to time your funding of your projects to coincide with your cash flow, your expected cash flow. So we'll be having conversations about that. We have gathered the request from the departments. They are currently assisting us with gathering the priorities for those. Those will be forwarded to the administrator, and there will be more conversations about that. Now, the timing of the SPLOST bonds that were included in the package, we have projected the issuance date of that to be the second quarter in 2022. Now, why is that important? Because there are interest costs that are associated with issuing and paying off bonds. We have projected or allocated approximately $4 million for interest cost, and that coincides with an issuance date during the second quarter. Next, please. Upcoming events. So what are we going to do next? Just recently, you guys discussed having a budget retreat and an update from the American Rescue Plan Act. I believe there's a proposed date that was sent out from the administrator's office for May the 26th. So I would anticipate that that probably will be one of the first discussions that we have relative to information that's included in this package. We're going to have a discussion about streetlight funding. We have to have a discussion about streetlight funding prior to the tax bills going out and the millage rate being set. About the first part of July, you will get the audit results from 2020. We will move shortly after that into setting the millage rate for 2021, and we will continue on with the 2022 budget process with a target date for adoption being the second meeting in November, as our local ordinance requires. Next one, please, Jeff. This is the index for the report package that was included with your agenda item. There's some narrative about the various funds, where they are, what we can expect, and a few repeats on there concerning your electric franchise fee, and your SPLOST reports are at the end listing the active projects that are still open under any phase of SPLOST that is currently open. So, any questions?
Then no one has any questions for the director? Well, thank you very much, ma'am. We appreciate your report.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Ms. Williams.
We would entertain a motion to receive this as information.
Not yet, Commissioner. I'm back.
You have
Almost
a
made it.
question?
Commissioner, not yet. I'm back. I got a couple things for the director.
Does that mean she got to repeat all of it?
Not quite, but nearly. Ms. Williams, I want to thank you for your report, but we're going to dive deep into what you presented today. And when we're talking about the street light, hopefully we don't have a discussion. We need to come up with an action plan to take care of that. And I'm gonna be forwarding those issues. And for as the budget retreat go itself, I agree with it, but I'm a little disappointed that it's for down in May. But we're going to move expeditiously on making sure that we go into this with an intent and come out with a plan. This is more than information. This is something that we need to act on. So looking at all the things that you brought forth, we're gonna have a thorough review of that. And I can assure you, I will be bringing forward some things that we need to move forward on. I apologize, my colleague from the second, but no, I don't want to just take this as information. We will, in the fact of today's meeting, but we're going to be aggressively moving forward to make some changes and make sure that we are ready for 2022 and close out 2021 properly. Is there any questions? Administrator, do you have any input?
Not necessarily. We're gearing up for the May 26th presentation and work session. I would say that while some of the things in the presentation did highlight what's coming forward, I think our robust conversation on the 26th, as well as information that I'll be working with Director Williams on and releasing to the commission, will kind of have a bit of a more involved process. And so the calendar is currently not set, and we'll be making some strong adjustments to bring back before the commission shortly.
I got dropped out again. Boy, I tell you.
You on, Commissioner Sayers? We can hear you.
Commissioner.
Frozen.
Say again?
Might be me, but
I think he's
couldn't-
frozen.
He's frozen again, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's done.
We're going through with the vote, Mrs. Bonner, or do we?
I mean, I don't know what action you can take on this today. I didn't think he indicated any specific action on the
No.
report. Unless I missed something.
No, I think it was just to receive it as information. He just sounded like he wanted his comments on the record.
Oh, okay.
Well, we just need if that's without objection from your committee, Mr. Chairman, we could do it
No.
without objection.
There's no objection. Thank you very much, Mrs. Bonner.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye.
Next on the agenda.
done.
That's
that
it.
completes our
We're
agenda.
done. Yes, sir. We're waiting on public safety now.
Thank you, Ms. Bonner. Call public safety to order with two items. Is Ms. Bonner, are there any additions or deletions?
No, sir.
If it please the rest of the committee, I'll entertain a motion to consent items 1 and 2.
So moved.
I'm a second.
Thank
Okay.
you. Vote, please.
Mr. Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dennis Williams,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bobby Williams. He's out. Mr. Brandon Garrett.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That motion carries with Mr. Bobby Williams out.
Thank you, ma'am. With no further business, public safety is adjourned.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That was quick.
Yee-hoo.
Yeah.
Ms.
Gotta move
Bond is-
on.
Ms. Bond, I think that was a conspiracy against me today.
You gotta get the birds off the wire out there.
Exercise. Nobody's
Come on.
conspiracy.
You know better than that.